So when it comes to building high performance homes, the standard has been set by passive houses. And passive houses advertise that they are 90% more efficient than the regular stick frame 2x4 that we've done for many decades. And I realize that the title of my video, in terms of being 90% even more efficient than a passive house, is probably going to get some skepticism out there, and I don't blame you, which is why I'm going to get into all the nerdy details about why the 5-story multi-generational passive ICF house that I'm building will actually be 90% more efficient than even the passive house. So need to establish a couple of details. One is the house that I'm building is actually 10,000 square feet as far as what I will be heating. If you include the unheated portion, and which is the crawl space, so I do have a crawl space down in the bottom. So I've got a crawl space level, a basement level, first, second, and third level above grade. Then I'm actually closing in on 12,000 square feet, 12,500 or so. And but in terms of heating, I'm only going to be talking about the heated portion, which is the 4 floors that are above. So let's get into some of the details about first passive house. So if you're not familiar with passive house, it's actually been around since the 1990s. It was a German, Scandinavian collaboration where they came up with a reasonably inexpensive way to build homes that are significantly more efficient than the ways that homes have been built for the longest time, specifically to decrease the heating and cooling costs. So the principles behind a passive house, the 6 principles, get out my little notes, is super insulation. So they go much higher than just the regular 2x4 insulation that in the homes behind me back there that you see that were built in the late 60s, early 70s. Those homes don't have a lot of insulation. So one is, and then the other part too about a passive house is the insulation needs to be a continuous layer of insulation. Another one of the principles is it needs to be thermal bridge free. So when you have a 2x4 in a wall, it's basically like a thermal bridge that allows the heat out of your house during the winter and allows heat in the house during the summer. So it needs to be thermal bridge free. Also, they want you to have high performance windows and doors. They also want you to make a super airtight home. So these homes behind me that were built in the late 60s, early 70s, if you were to do a ACH 50 score, so that's a blower door score, then those homes are going to probably be in the 10 plus range. So every hour in 20-mile-an-hour winds, all the air inside is going to leak out, all the air inside is going to leak out 20 times per hour. Sorry, not 20 times per hour, over 10 times per hour. So for passive house, it needs to be 0.6 ACH 50. So super airtight, like less than 1 time an hour for all that air to exchange. Another one of them is ventilation, because when you're building a super airtight home like that, you can end up with a really unhealthy indoor. In fact, the indoor air quality can be worse than the air quality of Los Angeles, which is pretty poor. So they want you to put in a heat recovery system. And then the last one is to design the windows in a way for passive solar gain. So that's a quick little summary about passive house. When you build a passive house, you can achieve 90% reduction on your heating and cooling needs, which equates to real dollars for heating and cooling. So that's phenomenal. But how is it that a passive ICF house is going to be able to improve on that by 90%? How am I going to pull off that little miracle? Well, part of it has to do with the climate that I'm in. A huge part of it has to do with the climate that I'm in. So I'm in a climate zone 5. I'm in a high mountain desert. We get less than 20 inches of annual rainfall, which means that we also have a ton of blue sky days, even though, today I'm shooting the video, it's not blue skies. The reason why that makes a difference is because of the solar heat gain that you're able to get with all of these days where the sun is coming in through the windows and providing me with free heat during the winter. So that helps a lot. Also, you'll notice my south-facing windows are over there. Look how many south-facing windows, and it's basically like that on each floor. Also, another thing that you'll notice with the passive house design is you want to minimize your windows on the west side. And so we have a total of 0 windows on the west side, and I've shot a video to explain why. Also, another thing, once I get the roof on and my windows in, I don't know if you can hear it, but I can hear it. So I can hear both the car outside, and I can also hear the jet flying over. However, once I get my high performance windows in, then, I should say my high performance window details in, you're not going to hear the car, you're not going to hear the jet, you're not going to hear the helicopters as well. So that's another benefit of high performance homes like passive homes as well as the ICF. So real quick, let's talk about ICF. For those of you who are not familiar with it, ICF stands for insulated concrete form. This is one of them. It's 2.5 inches of foam on the inside, 2.5 inches of foam on the outside, and then it's filled with concrete and rebar. And in a second, after I go over some figures, I will explain to you why that concrete is actually the real magic that makes it so that my ICF home is going to be 90% more efficient than even passive homes. So let's talk about some numbers in terms of, I ran the numbers for my area, checked with the neighbor who had a 7,000 square foot home here in the area and asked him about his heating and cooling needs and how much he was paying in his utility bills. So a 2x4 in my area for a 10,000 square foot home built with regular 2x4 construction, you can expect to spend a little over $10,000. So $10,260 a year to heat and cool a home that is that large. A passive house, on the other hand, drops your bill down to $5,400. So that's a significant amount of savings. However, my passive ICF house is going to be able to blow that out of the water, and I'll explain why. So let's go back to my zone, so zone 5. So zone 5, in the winter, we do end up with really cold temperatures. A couple weeks ago, it got down to 0 degrees. It's been in the teens for weeks and weeks now at night. Daytime temperatures in the 30s, 40s. For this next week, it's going to warm up to the 50s, which is nice for February 1st. During the summer, it's the exact opposite. So we see pretty wild swings between our daytime and nighttime temperatures. So in the summer, this last year we got up to, last summer I was working on this in 105 degree temperature, and we're regularly in the 90s, July, August, September, regularly in the high 90s. However, our nighttime temperatures, yeah, those actually do drop significantly, down into the 50s and 60s. And so for those of you who are familiar with that concept of those temperature swings, you might be catching on how I'm going to be able to cool my house for significantly less. Let me take you over here. So let's talk about how am I going to pull off a 90% improvement on a passive house design. And first we'll talk about the winter. So how am I going to heat? How am I going to heat for 90% less? Well, part of it has to do with my windows. Okay, so here's one of my large windows. So I will receive tens of thousands of free BTUs. Even on cloudy days, you still get BTUs coming in through your window. But the real magic is right down there. So down there is going to be a greenhouse that I am building on the outside of my ICF home. It's 72 feet long, 12 feet deep, and it's going to be a total of 20 feet high. So the amount of volume of air that I'm going to have inside that greenhouse is tremendous. And for anyone who's ever been inside of a greenhouse when it's, say, 20 degrees outside and nice and sunny, you know that it gets up to 80, sometimes even 90 degrees. And if the air temperature outside is even warmer, you can end up with a greenhouse that is regularly in the 90s. That's a lot of hot air that I'm going to be able to gain access to because of the fact that I'm building an ICF house. because normally you would not want to build a greenhouse on the side of a stick frame home. So a passive home, stick frame, you don't want to do it. You don't want to have that kind of humidity and dealing with that kind of humidity right on the outside of your studs. Not a good idea. However, I don't have any studs. I have concrete from the bottom all the way to the top. And at the end of the video, I'm going to share the secret another one of the secrets in terms of the details of why this house is going to be able to be 90% more efficient than even a passive house. But yeah, let's get back to the greenhouse. So the way that I plan on heating the home, my primary source of heat is actually going to be from the greenhouse. So what I'll be doing is I'll be taking the outside air, which during the day can be down in the teens. I will be running it through an aluminum pipe, all 72 feet long, and at the airflow that I'm running it through, then I will be able to, the heat inside the greenhouse will transfer to that air coming in through the pipe without transferring the humidity, because I only want the extra humidity when I need it. I don't want to turn my entire house into something that is incredibly humid like a greenhouse. So the air from the greenhouse, so the outside air will go through a filtration system first, and then it will pass through the greenhouse. And by the time it comes into the house, it's going to be in the 80-90 degree range. And because this is a multi-generational home, I'll have up to a lot of people. I'll just put it that way. In my city, they allow everyone that's related to me except for cousins living here. And 10,000 square feet, 4 floors, you can only imagine how many family members we'll be able to have here. But it's going to be a lot. And so to keep the indoor air quality good in terms of CO2 level, I need to be running at least 500. I need to be bringing in fresh outside air at about 500 CFM. So 500 CFM is what I need to bring in outside air. I can run that through my aluminum pipe in the greenhouse, and it's going to be heated to whatever the temperature is in the greenhouse, so 80, 90 degrees. Pumping that in throughout the day is going to warm up the house to a nice comfortable temperature of 72, 74, whatever we decide that we want it to be. Also, in terms of that 500 CFM, you probably already caught on that it doesn't take a lot of money to run a fan at 500 CFM. So during the daytime in the winter, it's going to be running. It's actually also going to be running at night. And when it's running at night, I don't want to be bringing in that air through the greenhouse because it will be significantly colder. However, the inside air, that stale air that goes out, is going to be going through a heat recovery ventilator system that's 95% efficient. And so the incoming air, as it goes through the HRV, the heat going out of the house, the stale air going out of the house, transfers its heat to the cold air coming in the house at 95% efficiency. So that's how I'm going to continue to have fresh air going throughout the day and the night. So that covers my heating during the winter. Now let's talk about the cooling during the summer. So in fact, I'll go ahead and take you up to the 3rd floor. Don't need that paper. Still have my paper that has all the dollar figures on it. So I'll take you up to the 3rd floor above grade. So you can see how I'm going to be cooling the house during the summer. All right, herein lies, well, first, check out those views from the 3rd floor. And they're even better when the clouds aren't here. But right here above me, you can see that 6-inch hole. And over here on the other end, you can see another 6-inch hole. Those 2 6-inch holes are capable of letting out over 500 CFM during the summer, because during the summertime, we have the exact opposite problem of during the winter. We want to get rid of that excess heat, and we want to replace it with some nice cool air. So because we all know that hot air, heat doesn't rise. Heat goes in whatever direction there's cold. But when it comes to hot air is less dense, and so it does rise. So up here on the 3rd floor, I have those 2 6-inch pipes that I'll be able to use to expel all the hot air that accumulates during the daytime. And here's the reason why this thing's going to work in my climate. Remember how I told you about the nighttime temperatures and how cool it gets at night? Well, as all that hot air is being expelled, because you've got 500 CFM of pressure that's pushing all of the air through this house, it's being replaced by that cool night air. So, how am I going to be able to have a 90% more efficient than even passive house design? It has to do with that 500 CFM. I have a free source of cool night air during the summer that's going to cool the house. I have a free source of warm air during the wintertime. And depending on the humidity level, I may actually allow some of the warm, humid air from the greenhouse to come in, because anyone who lives in a high mountain desert, especially during the winter, knows just how incredibly uncomfortable it can get when things are super dry. Just giving you a couple more views from up here. I wish you could see this mountain behind me, but it's covered by clouds. So I'll be able to keep the humidity at a comfortable level during the winter. I'll be able to heat the house from the greenhouse. So both the humidity and the heat will be coming from the greenhouse during the winter. And then during the summer, I'll be doing night flushing. So night flushing is where you pull in that cool air from outside during the summer and drive out all the hot air that is accumulated in the winter. So now I'll go ahead and spill the beans on the secret of why this thing's actually going to work compared to a passive house if it tried to do the same thing. And it has to do with this. See that concrete, that 8 inches of concrete? I have 1 million pounds of concrete that is in this 48-foot tall passive ICF house. That 1 million pounds of concrete is a thermal battery, and it can hold a tremendous amount of BTUs. So during the summertime, it will be absorbing a lot of the heat. And then at nighttime, it releases that heat. The opposite happens during the wintertime. So during the winter, it'll absorb the heat that I am inputting during the daytime. And then at night, it slowly releases that heat to the outside at night. And so in essence, during the summer, I'm living in a cave. I'm living in a very nice, cool, comfortable cave. And one of the guys that I got a window quote from, he worked down in St. George, Utah. And it's anyone who knows St. George, Utah, it's blistering hot in the summer. But he always loved installing windows in the ICF homes, because he said even though the windows weren't there yet, you walked into an ICF home and it just felt incredibly cool compared to the other homes, which were blistering hot, because of the fact of all of that concrete acting like a thermal battery and absorbing the heat instead of transferring it to you. So summertime, the thermal battery is going to help. Wintertime, the thermal battery is going to help. And that's what makes it possible so that during the winter, my nightly temperatures, it'll drop down to 68 by the time it gets to morning. But by the time I get done heating everything back up, by the end of the day, it's going to be up to 72. And I can live with a 4-degree swing of 68 to 72. Same thing in the summer. So I'll drop it down to 68 at night. So we'll start off at night at like 72. But by morning time, it's going to be down to 68. And then with the greenhouse in the winter, yes, when we wake up in the morning, it'll be 68 degrees, but we'll be able to swing it back up to 72 or whatever temperature that we want by nighttime. So the next question that you should be asking is, well, there's cloudy days, so what's your backup plan? So my backup plan is actually a mini split heat pump compressor that I will actually have down in the crawl space. So down in my crawl space, it's 13 feet below grade. It's a constant 52 degrees, basically all year round. When it's that low, the crawl space is 6'2". It's almost 2,500 square feet. It'll have a 4-inch concrete slab down on the bottom. That concrete slab is a heat sink. So during the summertime, as the mini split heat pump creates heat, because as it creates cool air, it's throwing off heat. Well, my concrete slab down in the crawl space will be absorbing that heat. And then in the winter, the opposite is happening. The mini split heat pump is creating cold air by sucking the heat out of the area, but that cold air is the heat from my concrete slab reheats up that cold air, so that as long as it's not running for weeks at a time, it's actually able to keep up. So that's the plan B. And running a mini split heat pump costs almost next to nothing. It's very, very energy efficient. Costs a lot more than just the fan running a 500 CFM, but nonetheless, it's still, it doesn't cost a lot to run. So now let's get to the numbers. Okay, I think I already mentioned that the 2x4, so the home right across the street that was built a long time ago, annual cost for heating and cooling, if it was 10,000 square feet, or let's actually point out some 10,000 square foot homes. So the ones down there, if they were built in like the 80s, they'd be 2x4 construction, minimal insulation, etc. Very drafty, costs at least $10,000. And the reason why I know that this is actually pretty accurate is because my neighbor who had the 7,000 square foot home, he was paying $2,000 a month in utilities. And so conservatively speaking, for a 7,000 square foot home to be spending $1,000 just on heating and cooling is not out of the realm of possibility. And that was here in the same city. So let's say you do new construction. So this home over here was built just a few years ago. They probably did do 2x6 construction. Their estimated annual, or actually these homes down here, they were just built a few years ago, so they're probably 2x6 construction. So that's 10,000 square feet. So $9,556. So the old 2x4s, 90% more expensive to heat and cool than a passive house. 2x6, so these new 2x6 ones are 77% more expensive than to heat than a passive house. And even if you were to go with 2x12 walls, that's 55% more expensive than if you were to build to passive house standards. And then you get to mine, my passive ICF house. Before I tell you how much, and I keep leading you along. So a passive house standard for the blower door score is 0.6 for an ACH 50 test. And so that means if you had 20-mile-an-hour winds, then you would only be turning over all the air in the house like twice an hour. That's pretty darn good. And the reason why that makes such a huge difference is because if you've got unconditioned air coming in from the outside, that's really energy inefficient. If you have your conditioned air on the inside that's escaping out, that's also energy inefficient. Unless you have an HRV where you can be passing along the heat in either direction depending on the season. My house is going to be around 0.25, so 3 times more efficient than even the passive house. So that's one of the reasons why I'll be able to heat and cool this thing with a fan blowing 500 CFM. And so let's get to the dollar figure. So the dollar figure to run a fan at 500 CFM 24/7 all year round. Remember, I get free heat from my greenhouse and I get free cooling from the nice air temperatures that we have in this high mountain desert. So the total is $240 a year. $240 a year to heat and cool 10,000 square feet. Now, because there are going to be some days where I am going to have to run the mini split heat pump, I decided to go ahead and basically double that. So for my 90% figure, I'm saying I'm going to be spending $540 a year to heat and cool this 10,000 square foot multi-generational passive ICF house. And yes, I will be setting up a system so that I can actually monitor how much that fan is costing me, and also monitor if and when the mini split heat pump kicks on. I'll be monitoring how much that costs me so that you can actually see, instead of estimates, you'll actually be able to see bills. And I'll also see if I can talk with some neighbors down here who have 10,000 square foot homes so that we can actually compare. Instead of estimates, that we'll actually be able to compare bills. So let me know down in the comment section what you think of my plans for heating and cooling this multi-generational home. And if you have any questions, let me know. And this has been 25 minutes. So anyone who's stuck around till the end, I just want to thank you. Be sure to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.